The USGA just made a decision about the 2026 U.S. Open that nobody outside of one small room knew about. And when the best golfers on the planet finally saw it, they stopped dead in their tracks. Nobody prepared for this. And that's exactly the point. If you've ever watched the U.S. Open and thought to yourself, is this actually golf or is this just punishment? Then you need to understand what happened at Shinnecock Hills in 2004 and 2018. Because those 2 weeks didn't just make players angry. They broke something. They forced one of golf's most powerful organizations to sit by a fire pit with a 2-time U.S. Open champion and ask themselves a question that changed everything about how they run this event. And that question is sitting at the center of everything happening at Shinnecock Hills this week. But before we get there, if you're new here and you care about golf the way golf deserves to be cared about, hit subscribe. This channel goes deep on the things that actually matter, not just a leaderboard. Now let's get into it. To understand what the USGA did differently this year, you have to understand what they did wrong before. Shinnecock Hills has hosted the U.S. Open 5 times. 3 of those were considered great. 2 of them became cautionary tales. In 2004, warm wind hit harder than anyone expected, and the greens went from difficult to genuinely unplayable. Not firm, not fast, unplayable. The USGA made the extraordinary call to water a specific hole between groups, not before the round, between groups while competition was live. The average score across the entire field that week was nearly 79. Not one player finished under par for the tournament. And Jerry Kelly stood in front of the camera and said something that ricocheted to the golf world. He believed they were ruining the game, not testing it, ruining it. Then 2018 arrived. The wounds from 2004 had barely closed, and Shinnecock ripped them open again. On Saturday, the last 45 players on the tee couldn't break par. Rory McIlroy opened the tournament with an 80 after going 6 over through just 5 holes. Jon Rahm finished 15 over across 2 rounds and went home. Jordan Spieth missed his first major cut in 14 starts. And then Phil Mickelson, in one of the strangest moments in modern major championship history, deliberately struck a moving ball on the 13th green rather than watch it roll off the putting surface again. Zach Johnson told the camera that the USGA had lost the golf course. And he wasn't wrong. What most people never heard about is what happened after that week ended. Behind closed doors, the USGA privately acknowledged that both 2004 and 2018 had failed. Not just in terms of optics. Genuine operational failures. John Bodenhamer, the man who runs course setup for this organization, was given a direct assignment. Figure out exactly what went wrong, and make sure it never happens again. Now here's where the story gets interesting, because what he found out wasn't what most people assumed. Stay with me here, because the answer to that question is the reason everything at Shinnecock Hills looks completely different in 2026. And the players who walked this course during their scouting rounds came back with reactions that range from cautiously optimistic to quietly alarmed. And both groups might be right. When players arrived this week expecting the standard U.S. Open formula, narrow corridors, suffocating rough, greens running at 13 on the stim meter, they found fairways averaging 48 yards across. In 2018, those fairways were 42 yards. At Oakmont last year, they were 32. Bodenhamer confirmed publicly that the USGA wanted to restore Shinnecock closer to how its architect William Flynn originally designed it back in 1931. Wide, strategic corridors that gave players genuine options. His words were direct. They wanted to let Shinnecock be Shinnecock. And Scottie Scheffler, who was visiting this course for the very first time during his scouting trip, came back with a description that should make every player in this field a little nervous. He said the green complexes are extraordinarily difficult. He said the USGA can pin the ball wherever they want and make scores as high as they could possibly want them to be. Read that again. The greens are a weapon, and the wide fairways just lure you into range. Rory McIlroy played a full scouting round and explained it with this kind of clinical precision that reminds you why he's one of the best analysts of golf courses on earth. He said the fairways are very generous, more generous than 2018, but the first cut of rough is 5 inches long, and that first cut is maybe 3 paces wide before it turns into fescue. So if you miss the fairway, Even by a yard, you deserve a bad lie. That's the trap. The fairways look like mercy. They're not. They're a more sophisticated kind of pressure. And this is what makes 2026 genuinely fascinating rather than just theoretically interesting, because the specific players in this field have wildly different relationships with this setup. Scottie Scheffler is chasing the career Grand Slam. A win here would make him only the 7th player in history to hold all 4 major titles at the same time, joining a list that includes Jack Nicklaus and Tiger Woods. The final round falls on his 30th birthday. He's the best player on the planet right now, and he had never set foot on this property before his scouting visit. History, pressure, and a puzzle he's never solved before, all converging at the same moment. That's either the setup for one of the greatest performances in major championship history, or it's too much weight for any human being to carry cleanly. McIlroy carries a specific scar from this place. He shot an 80 in the first round of the 2018 U.S. Open here. He's back now playing arguably the best golf of his career, coming off back-to-back Masters titles. But there are serious questions about whether his ball flight and driving tendencies actually suit what Shinnecock demands, and wider fairways don't fix a trajectory problem. Tommy Fleetwood has the most complicated relationship with this course of anyone in the field. In the 2018 final round, he shot a 63, a course record, what may have been the finest single round of golf this course has ever witnessed, and he still lost. Brooks Koepka had already posted a score. Fleetwood's extraordinary day fell 1 shot short. He walks back here carrying the memory of giving absolutely everything and still not being enough. Brooks Koepka, meanwhile, won that championship and has dominated the U.S. Open like few players of his generation. But he arrives in 2026 struggling with his putter, and in a U.S. Open where the greens are the primary defense. Putting poorly is not a minor issue. Now, keep this in mind as we get into the players who could genuinely shock this field, because I think 2 names are being seriously overlooked. And one of them has the kind of recent form that barely registered in the mainstream conversation, which means the odds the market is giving him are genuinely wrong. Cameron Young grew up in the area surrounding Shinnecock Hills. He knows the wind patterns, the crowd dynamics, the way this particular corner of Long Island behaves in mid-June. Local knowledge at a course this sensitive to conditions is a real competitive edge, and he's been playing some of the most consistent golf on tour over the past 10 months. He enters at 18-1. Those odds significantly undervalue what he's been doing. Matt Fitzpatrick is the player this field is most dramatically underestimating. A former U.S. Open champion, a player who has already proven he can win on exactly the kind of green-focused, precision-demanding setup that Shinnecock presents this year. And between the Masters and the PGA Championship this season, he won 3 of 4 PGA Tour starts, a stretch of form that almost nobody in the mainstream conversation has mentioned. His game fits this specific test, as well as anyone's in the field. Now, here's the deeper philosophical shift that I think defines what makes 2026 genuinely different from what came before it. After 2018, Curtis Strange, 2-time U.S. Open champion, found Bodenhamer at the Broadmoor, and they sat together by a fire for 2 hours. Strange told him that his U.S. Open victories were the proudest wins of his career, memories he still lived inside every single day. But he also said something that clearly landed hard. He said that when he sees the winning score at a U.S. Open above par, his first thought isn't about the difficulty of the course. His first thought is whether the USGA manufactured a score to make the event about itself rather than about the best players in the world competing on a great golf course. Bodenhamer took that question and let it reshape how he thinks about setup. Why should we force it to a score and make it about us? That's the question now driving every decision. And there's a genuinely important operational change that goes with it. The USGA previously tried to have the course fully presentation ready early in the week. At Shinnecock, that's impossible to sustain for 7 or 8 days without losing control. So now they build toward it. The course reveals itself gradually, hitting its peak conditioning Friday, Saturday, and Sunday when it matters most. That sounds like a small adjustment. It's not. It's the direct response to the moisture management failure that turned 2018 into a disaster. Because what Bodenhamer found when he went back through all the data was that the problem in 2018 wasn't recklessness. It was timing. The greens went into wilt. a condition where the POA annual leaf blade loses hydration faster than anyone can respond, and Shinnecock Hills, sitting between Peconic Bay and the Atlantic Ocean on sandy soil with greens perched on exposed hillsides, is uniquely vulnerable to exactly that. When sun and wind arrive together here, moisture leaves the ground faster than at virtually any other venue the USGA visits. And if you fall behind, there is no catching up. That risk has not been eliminated. It has been managed more carefully. But it has not been eliminated. Mother Nature always gets a seat at the table. And at Shinnecock, maybe more than anywhere else, she tends to sit at the head of it. So what does all of this actually mean for this week? Here's what I think is true. The USGA has built a test where the danger is real but hidden. Wide fairways look like an invitation. 5 inches of rough on the edges and nearly unmakeable pin positions on some of the most complexly sloped greens in championship golf are the actual examination. Players who read this correctly, who understand that the wider corridors aren't a gift, have a genuine chance. Players who walk in believing this is a friendlier U.S. Open are going to find out very quickly that Shinnecock Hills hasn't gotten easier. The trap has just been reset. Whether this is the smartest setup decision the USGA has made in 2 decades, or whether this is a setup for something that unravels in ways nobody had predicted yet, that starts Thursday. And there are 9 players already watching the weather forecast very carefully. Because at this course, in this tournament, the weather doesn't just affect the scores. It decides everything.